welcome to today's brush party. So before we get started, we've still got a couple of minutes, so I just want to talk you through all the equipment, make sure you've all got everything you need before we get started. So you're going to need to make sure you have got a fresh bar of water. You're also going to want to make sure you have got some napkins or some paper towels of some kind, because they're really useful if you have any little spillages, but also for cleaning your brushes and for just generally clearing up any little messes. So it's definitely worth having some paper towels or tissues of some kind to hand with you. So I've also got my palette. Now my palette is just a paper plate, so you guys can use one of these if you've got any, or you could use a plate from your kitchen as well. That's absolutely fine. The plate from your kitchen is really easy to wash up afterwards as well, so you don't need to worry about you staining any of your plates. So I've also got my canvas. Now my canvas is in the landscape position. So that means I have got my long edges at the top and bottom and my short edges at the sides. But you guys can do this picture whichever way around you would like. There are no rules. So you might have a square bit of paper. You might even have a round canvas. It could be any shape you want it to be. It does not matter as long as you have it round some way, it will be absolutely fine. The instructions work exactly the same no matter which way around you have your picture. So do not panic, do not worry too much about anything. And I'm going to talk you through every step as well. So whichever way around you want to have your picture is entirely up to you. You could also have as many hedgehogs as you want. So you don't just have to do one. You could have a couple of hedgehogs on there. You can have loads of hedgehogs. It's entirely up to you. You could also make them whatever colour you want. They don't have to be brown. They are brown, but they don't have to be. And you can also change the colour of the butterfly if you would like to. You can change the colour of your background. You could add some little flowers into the grassy bits. There are loads and loads of things that you can change in this painting. So it's entirely up to you. See how much you want to change and how much you want to keep the same. So I've also got my brushes. Now we use the same 3 brushes for all of our brush party classes. And those brushes are, firstly, one big brush. Now yours might be a slightly different shape and that is fine as long as it's nice and big. That's all that matters because we just use it for that background, gets it covered nice and quickly. So one big brush. Then we've also got our 3/8 brush. Now this is a small flat angled brush. So it's flat and then it's got that little angled top there. Sometimes it's called a half brush, sometimes it's called a cropped brush. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And this is really, really handy for doing all of those spikes and the grasses. There's quite a lot of spikes to give our hedgehog. So one of these is really handy, but if you don't have one, do not worry, because the other thing you can use is one of these. This is a number 6 brush. It's just small, round and pointy. And again, yours might be called something different. Don't worry if yours isn't called number 6. It does not matter. As long as it's small, round and pointy, yours might actually be a little bit smaller. I've got 2 different sized ones here. So yours might be a bit smaller, yours might even be a bit bigger. It doesn't matter, as long as it's small, round and pointy, you can do all of the details in this whole painting with that brush, so you'll be absolutely fine. Now, last and most importantly, acrylic paint stains. It does not come out of clothing and it does not come out of carpets or curtains or cushions or any of your soft furnishings. So please, please make sure you are wearing something that you don't mind getting paint on. I'm in my overalls and in my apron just to be safe. But I don't want you guys to ruin your favourite clothes. So please, please make sure you've got an apron on or you're wearing something that you don't mind getting paint on. It's 2 o'clock, which means it's officially time to get started. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is September, like the month. I know, very silly name, but I didn't choose it. So there we go. So yeah, my name is September and I am going to be talking you through every single step of the super, super cute Bruce Quillis. It's a pretty cool name. It just made me laugh when I first heard it. So I'm very excited to be teaching this today because I think you guys are the first ones to be learning how to paint this, which is super exciting. So just quickly, I'm going to run back through that equipment and then we're going to talk paint colours. So that list of equipment was a fresh pot of clean water, some napkins or paper towels of some kind, a palette, which can either be a paper plate or a plate from your kitchen, entirely up to you. And then my canvas, which is in the landscape position. So my long edges are at the top and bottom, and my short edges are at the sides. But as I've said, you guys can do this picture whichever way round you would like. There are no rules. You can do as much or as little the same as me as you would like to. It entirely depends on what colours you want to use, how many hedgehogs you want. It's entirely up to you. So then I talked about my brushes, and I was saying that we always use the same 3 brushes. One big brush, which it doesn't matter what shape it is, as long as it's nice and big, just for doing our background. One small flat brush, which has got a little angled top, which is excellent for doing line work, but not essential because you can do all the details in this painting with a brush like this. Just a small round pointy brush will be perfect. And so the next thing is colours, because as I've said, you can change your colours as much as you would like for this painting. But what we're going to do is we're just going to start with our background. We're just going to start with our 2 background colours so that we don't need to get too many paints out at once. And those background colours are a little bit of blue and quite a lot of white. So I'm going to start with a little bit of blue. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of blue you've got. You just need a little blob of blue and quite a big blob of white, because we need to cover our whole background in this colour. So let me show you. Now I've got quite a lot of paint out because I've got quite a big canvas. My canvas is pretty much bigger than me. So I've got quite a lot of paint out. But here we go. I've got some blue, and I've got, sorry, the way the light hits it makes it impossible to see. There we go. And I've got some white. And at the moment, that's all we need. But you guys could do your background, whatever colour you would like. It doesn't have to be the same colour as the sky. You could make it like a red colour, maybe like it's at the sunset, or you can make it pink. You can make it any colour. It's entirely up to you. So the other things I just want to tell you about before we start are we've got our live chat feature up and running. Now that is there for you guys. If you have any questions, if you're stuck on anything, if you want me to go back over anything, if you just want to say hi, it is there for you to use. So please feel free. It's just that little box on the, I think it's on the right hand side. No, it's on the left hand side of your screen, I think. It's on the right hand side of mine, and I think it's on the other side of your screen. It's on the side of the screen, and you can use that as much as you need to, but you can also pause and rewind as we're going. So you can go back over any bits you think you might have missed. You can pause and, you know, come back to it later. You might need to wait for your canvas to dry so you can have a little break before it dries off. Lots and lots of reasons why you might just want to stop and come back to it later, which you are more than welcome to do. So you don't need to paint along with me. You can, you know, pause it when I've given the instructions, then you can do it, and then you can join back in later. Completely depends how you want to do your painting, but please don't feel like you have to rush. You've got plenty of time. So I think we should get started. Now I'm starting with my big brush, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pop our big brush into our pot of water and give it quite a good wiggle around. So I'm pressing it quite hard into the bottom of my water pot. It's just really good for loosening up your bristles. Now, acrylic paints work at their best if they're a little bit watery. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by mixing together quite a lot of white. So I'm just separating out a little bit of my white and a bit of blue. We don't need too much blue because we want quite a pale blue for our background. We want it nice and light because it's going to help Bruce to stand out a little bit more. There we go. So a lovely pale blue colour. Then what I do is I take my brush and I actually stick it back into my pot of water, and I transfer a whole brush load of water into my paint. And what I do is I press my brush into the paint and then give it a really good stir around. What we're doing is we're making our paint much more watery so that it spreads out a lot more easily on that canvas. So couple of brush loads of water to get it really nice and smooth and fluid, so it's just going to go on a lot more easily, and then we can start painting. And what we're going to do is we're going to use super messy brush strokes. This is my favourite way of painting, but it can get a bit messy, so do be careful. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick up that pale blue paint that we've just added our water to, and you can start anywhere because we're covering the whole picture, and you literally just want to cover your whole canvas in very messy, flicky brush strokes. So I'm just flicking my brush in all different directions. I'm holding it quite close to the bristles because then you have a little bit more control You can press a little bit harder. I've flicked so much paint on my shelf already. There we go. Now, if you've got a canvas, one really important thing you have to do is paint your edges. Because when you hang these up in your house, people are going to be able to see those edges. So it's quite nice if they're neatly finished. So what I do is I actually start with my edges. I have to stand on tiptoes to reach the top edge, but that's okay. And then all along here. And then I'm going to go down the other side. And what you can do is you can then paint the whole front. And then in a little bit, once we finish painting the front, you can flip your canvas over so you can paint the bottom as well. Because at the moment, it doesn't actually matter which way up our canvas is. So back to the front. Now, what you can do, if you want to make your blue sky a little bit more interesting, what you can do, pick up your pale blue colour. But then you could also pick up a really teeny tiny little bit of blue right on the end of your brush. And then as you carry on with those messy brush strokes, brushing all over your canvas, what will happen is you'll get a couple of different shades of blue showing through because your dark blue will be mixing in those brush strokes with your lighter blue. So you end up with a patchy, slightly like all different coloured blue sky, and it just makes it look really interesting and exciting. So this time I've picked up a little bit of blue again, and also a little bit of white, so that some of these bits are going to go a bit lighter, some of them are going to go a bit darker. I am brushing back over some of the bits I've already done just to make sure all my paint is spreading out and blending really nicely, so that all those colours are really mixing together. There's a little dog hair in my painting now, so I'm just going to see if I can get the hair out. There we go. And then we end up with this really lovely, patchy, all different shades of blue. Background. And we just carry on with these messy brush strokes until the whole canvas is covered. So while we're painting the hedgehog today, I've also got some hedgehog facts. I've been learning about hedgehogs because I met a lady the other day who has a pet hedgehog, which is pretty cool, very cute, but they take a lot of work. They are not easy pets to have. I definitely don't think I'd want a pet hedgehog. They take a lot of looking after. Also, they're nocturnal, which means they like to sleep during the day and they like to do all their playing in the night time. And I think I'd miss out if I had a hedgehog. I'd want to play with it in the daytime, and you can't do that because they're nocturnal. Anyway, one of the other things I found out about hedgehogs that I never ever knew is that they didn't always used to be called hedgehogs. They actually used to be called urchins, and that is why sea urchins are called sea urchins. So sea urchins are like super spiky little balls that live at the bottom of the ocean, or sometimes they're attached to rocks, but they're really spiky, and they get their name, sea urchin, from the fact that hedgehogs used to be called urchins as well. And they look a little bit like really tiny round hedgehogs. I just always thought they were called hedgehogs for their whole life. But no, they used to be known as urchins. But you can kind of understand why they get called hedgehogs now. And the reason they're called hedgehogs is actually quite simple. The hedge part is because they live in hedges. They make their nests and hang out in hedges and shrubs and plants and things. If you've ever seen a hedgehog, you probably see them near bushes, and that's where they like to hang out. So hedge for where they live, and hog because they make little grunting piggy noises, just like pigs. So hog for pigs. It's not really very inventive, is it? There we go. So I'm almost there with my different shades of blue. And I've actually used up most of my pale, oh gosh, most of my pale blue has been used up now. So just trying to mix up one final little bit of pale blue with a bit of water mixed into it, just to finish off that last little bit down in the corner. And you can see my my messy brush strokes. You can see how they're sort of all going in slightly different directions. In fact, if I tilt this forwards a bit, it should get less shiny. There we go. You can see it a bit better now. Now it's less shiny. And I just brush back into some of the other bits. Now you might find, and I'm definitely finding this today, that I get some little white speckly bits on my canvas. Now the white speckly bits are absolutely fine. They are nothing to worry about. What it is it's just where the texture of your canvas, you know, if you touch them, they're a little bit rough. And it's just where all that roughness, sometimes in places on the canvas, it's a little bit deeper. So you'll find that in some places, the paint just doesn't quite sink into the texture enough. So all you need to do is mix a little bit more water into your paint. And make sure you mix it really well, because you don't want lots of water on your brush. You want your water really mixed in with your paint. And then with lots and lots of paint on your brush, you can just brush back into those speckly bits, making sure your paint's quite thick, and it will just go into those little holes and cover them up. But I've got quite a few on here today, so I think this is a particularly textured canvas, maybe. There we go. So I'm just looking really close, sorry. Looking really close at my canvas to see where my little white speckly bits are. But it does help to cover them up if you've got quite a lot of water mixed in with your paint. Just helps it to spread out more and settle into the texture of your canvas a bit more. Oh, there must have been a bit of blue paint on my brush there. There we go. I think that's all of it paint. Oh no, I missed a little bit down here. I think that's all of it painted. So once you've done the front, what you can do is literally turn your canvas upside down so you can paint the bottom. I'm just going to, because I've got space at the bottom, I'm just going to paint along that bottom edge as it is, but you might want to just flip your canvas over. As I say, at the moment, it doesn't matter which bit is the top and which bit is the bottom, so you don't need to worry too much. But what you could do is you could look at it and you could say, I think this bit would look nicer at the top, and then you can decide which way up you want it. There we go. That is the whole thing painted. So I'm going to try and put it back upright, but it might go a bit shiny again because it's a bit wet and there's some bright light shining on it. There we go. That's a little bit better, isn't it? Sort of. Still a little bit shiny. I'll leave it tilted forward so you can see it a bit better. And once you've done this, once you've covered your whole canvas in your blue paint, your blue and white mixture, or whatever colour you've gone for, the next thing to do is give that big brush a really, really good rinse off, because we finished with them. So we don't need our big brushes anymore. You can give them a really good clean. In fact, no, we are going to use them for one more little thing. I've changed my mind. We're going to use them for one more little thing. And for this, we're going to need a little bit of yellow. We're going to add just a tiny little bit of grass at the bottom of the canvas just to get us started, because it's going to make it a lot easier later on when we come to add our tall grasses. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a very little bit of yellow, just a really teeny tiny bit. Oh, I think my hair was touching my canvas. I'm gonna have blue hair today. And what I'm gonna do, I've only added a tiny, teeny little bit. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some of this yellow and mix it into my pale blue, so that I've just got a little bit of green paint. I don't have too much green paint, just a little bit. Add a little bit of white to make it nice and bright. And what I'm gonna do, this is gonna seem a little bit weird, but it will make sense in a minute. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this brush, and instead of, I'm gonna add a little bit of water into our paint to make it nice and smooth, but we don't need as much water this time, because what we're gonna do is gonna take our big brush and really squidge it around and squish it into the canvas, so that all our bristles get broken up and our brush is really messy. But that's actually exactly what we want, because what we're going to do really quickly, just a little quick addition that should take 2 seconds, and then we can get on with painting Bruce. But what we want to do with our super messy broken up brush, just work our way all the way along the bottom edge of the picture, just flicking that brush up from the bottom. Now this doesn't need to be neat. It can be really quite messy. You just want these flicky brush strokes in green. Now my green isn't very bright, so I'm actually just going to make mine a little bit darker so you guys can see it a bit better. You can make your green whatever colour you would like. You can even, if you've got a green that's already made, you could use that. So I've just added a bit more blue to mine to make it a bit darker so you guys can hopefully see it a bit better. There we go, and I'm just flicking my brush up from the bottom. I'm not making my line neat. I'm making it really quite messy. Just messy brush strokes coming up from the bottom but going in slightly different directions. And this is just going to give our little hedgehog something to stand on. Otherwise, he's not going to have any grass. And he needs grass, because grass is where all the insects live, and that is what he likes to eat. Caterpillars and bugs. There we go. Lots of little messy brush flicks that sort of go a bit scraggly and scratchy, so that Bruce has got somewhere to stand. Then we can start painting him. Now you can wash your big brushes. My brush a really, really good rinse off. And what we're going to do is we need to mix up some brown, because we're going to start by adding all the spiky bits. Now these are sometimes called quills or spines. I call them spiky. If you've ever touched a hedgehog, they're super spiky. But all his little spikes, I'm going to use my small angled brush because I quite like this brush. But if you don't have one, you could always use your small pointy one. And what we're going to do to make brown is we're going to need some more yellow and a little bit of red, because we're going to start with orange. And then we're going to add a tiny, tiny little bit of black into our orange. So let me start with my yellow. We want mostly yellow, because when you're mixing acrylics, you always start with your lightest colour. So yellow. Then I want a little bit of red. Now I'm not putting them on top of each other. I'm putting them just next to each other, so I can mix them up myself. A little bit of red. And I'm going to pop a little bit of black on my palette as well, because we're going to need a tiny bit of black later on when we do our butterfly. So just pop a little bit of black. Like so. So I've got my red, my yellow, and my black. My black's kind of on my green, but my green's quite dry, so I'm not too worried about that. Now, with my small angled brush, I'm going to start by sticking it in my pot of water again, because we want to get our brush nice and ready for painting with. And what I'm going to do, as I said, I'm going to start with yellow. Now, we need quite a lot of brown, so I'm starting with quite a big blob of yellow, like so. Just brought it around down to here. And then I'm going to add a little brush load of red, just a little brush load, because the pigments in red are super strong, and you can see that little bit of red in all that yellow, and it's already gone orange. So you really don't need too much. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the teeniest, and I mean teeniest tiniest little bit of black paint. So on the corner of my brush, one tiny little bit, and stirring it in until I get a nice brown colour. Now it's still a little bit light for my liking. I think I want Bruce to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to add a tiny little bit more black, tiny bit at a time. And I'm also going to add a bit more red. Just a little bit more red. Now, if you've got a pre-mixed brown, you're more than welcome to use pre-mixed brown. That is absolutely fine. But I'm just going to mix up a bit more red and a little bit more black, just to make it more of like a chocolatey colour brown. At the moment, it looks a little bit like toffee colour. I want it a bit darker, like chocolate colour. But my red sort of drifted down my palette, so my red's getting a little bit involved, but that's fine. There we are, this is better. So a bit of a darker brown going on. There we go, much better. So I'm going to stir this in. Now, we've got a lot of spiky bits to add. The average hedgehog has between 5,000 and 7,000. That's so many, 5,000 to 7,000 little quills. So we've got a lot of lines to add. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add quite a lot of water with my brush. I'm going to take brush loads of water to mix into my brown colour, because this will help make our paint go further and make it a lot easier to put on the palette. Otherwise, we're going to be here forever. To put on the canvas, sorry. So plenty of brush loads of water. And then really stir those all together so that it's your paint that's nice and smooth and it's not your brush that's full of water, because we don't want any drips. Or we want to try and avoid drips anyway. Oh, my paint's gone all the way around the bottom of my palette. That's fine. So once you've got your paint ready, what we're going to do is we're just going to start by kind of mapping in where we want Bruce to be on the canvas. Now, the beauty of acrylic paints is we can paint over anything we need to. So if you put them on and you think, I don't really like it, we can solve that problem. So do not panic at all. But what you want to do is you want to find about where the middle of your canvas is, which is about here for me, I think. So the middle down and the middle across is about here. And then what you want to do is you just want to come a little bit lower and leave yourself a little brown dot. Now, this is where we're going to start Bruce from. And what we want to do is we want to start with a little bit of a curved line. So what we're going to do is we're just going to really lightly, so I'm not even painting, I'm just pressing my brush. With whichever brush you're using, you can just leave little markers curving all the way around to where his back would be. So I'm just making, he's kind of like the end of a potato. It's not very neat at the moment. And then to go forwards, we want to do a similar thing, but we're going to stop part way down, because then he's going to have his little face. So we're just making this, so we start at that top center and then we just press our brush in to curve backwards, down and around. And he's going to end up being bigger than this. So I know mine looks a little bit small, but we're going to add spikes to this, so he's going to get quite a lot bigger. Now, once we've got that shape, and again, if your shape is different to mine, don't worry, because we're going to add spikes over the top. We're not even going to see this line that I've added. I'm just going to pop a little bit more water into my paint and just really stir it in. And then we can start to add those quills, the spiky bits. Now, don't worry, you don't have to add 5,000. But what we want to do, if you're using your small angled brush, is you want to start with your long bristles inside your line and your short bristles facing up. If you're using your small pointy brush, you don't need to worry at all about which way you hold your brush. Just make sure you've got the brush bit touching your canvas. And what we're going to do is we're going to start all the way down here where his face is probably going to end up. And we're going to start by going straight up. And then we're just gradually going to start turning the brush. So those spiky bits are going to end up gradually leaning over and over. So they're following the shape of his body. Can you see that? So I started by facing my brush up, and then what I've done is I've gone round, is I've gradually just started leaning my brush further and further round, so his spikes follow quite a distinctive shape. So they're all facing backwards. And once you've mapped those in, what you can do is you can then start to add proper, nice, thick quills. Now to do this, I actually use my brush the other way around, and I have my long bristles facing up and my short bristles facing into my hedgehog. And now we can sort of thicken these up a bit so we can have even more. You can press a little bit harder. You can start to really drag them down into Bruce's body. You also don't have to call your hedgehog Bruce, by the way. He doesn't have to be called Bruce. So I'm just using my brush a little bit thicker, pressing as I drag my brush in, filling in all the little gaps so he starts to have a much more solid body. I'm going to tilt this forwards again, there we go, so it's less shiny. But I'm still following that original sort of shape of all those spiky bits leaning backwards, facing back towards me, so away from his face. They look a little bit like flower petals, don't they? Like brown flower petals. Until you get down to the bottom. And then what we want to do is we just want to leave a little space for his face. Now I find the easiest way to do this is kind of similar to how we just drew in the shape of Bruce. So what I do, where we finished the spikes, where we left that space for his face, is I'm just going to create a little curvy circle shape. Now his face is not going to be this big. He doesn't need, actually it can be definitely less big than that. But you want it a bit like a squished out S shape. So ignore this line, this was not a good line by me. So what I've done is I've started at the edge of where my brown spikes were. And I've just done like a really long spread out S shape coming down his body. And once we've done that, what you need to do is you need to add loads of your spikes. So I'm now going to come inside his body and just start layering these up. So just going all the way around again. And although you can't see all of them, because they're kind of all the same colour, what will happen is you'll be able to see some of those brush strokes. So you'll be able to see some of the distinction between his different layers of quills. And then when you get down to the bottom, you can just go along the bottom with his spikes facing down. You don't need to worry so much about his bottom. His bottom's not too important. But you do just want to make sure he's got a couple of little spikes down there and they're just all facing down. And then as I say, it's just a case of adding loads of spikes. So those of you who have done a session with me before will know that I have a little dog. Now my little dog is terrified of hedgehogs. And the reason that he's terrified of hedgehogs is because there was one day when I was out walking him and he went to sit down and he sat on a hedgehog. He was not very happy about it. The hedgehog was fine. It rolled up in a ball and then ran away. They're really fast, hedgehogs. They're really fast. But yeah, my dog now does not like hedgehogs very much. I think he's a bit scared of them. Probably got a bit spiked on his bottom, I think. There we go. So can you see I'm still kind of keeping the shape of my spikes? So I'm making all my spikes still follow the same shape as those first ones. So I'm curving them around with that original shape. So the ones at the bottom are kind of facing down, and the ones at the top are facing away from his face. And I've got a couple of little gaps in there. Can you see where you can still see some blue? So I'm just going to go over those. Just all with little dashy brush strokes. Because I want all of him covered. So you might not ever have seen a hedgehog, because hedgehogs tend, not always, but most of the time they come out at night because they're nocturnal, like I said. So that's why I don't think they make very good pets, because you'd never really see them. But one of the reasons they come out at night is because in the daytime, they can't really see very well. They're a little bit blind in the daylight. So at night time, they can see a lot better. There we are. So just getting to that last little bit in there. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I've gone over my line a little bit. That is absolutely fine. It does not matter at all, because when we add the little face bit in, we're going to kind of cover that over anyway. So don't worry at all. Just make sure his whole body is full of little spikes. There we go. Now I'm just going to rinse my brush off a little bit while you guys just finish off adding your spikes. I know I go really quickly, so don't worry about keeping up with me. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time now to just make sure you've all got your spikes on there. And then what we can do is we can start to add his super cute little face. He is super cute. So I think one of the reasons that he's so cute is because of his long pointy snout, and that's where all his snuffling, grunting sounds come from. But it's also very important for their eating. So even though they can see a lot better in the dark, they don't look for food, they sniff for food. So sometimes they spot it on the ground and they think, oh, that's going to be delicious. But a lot of the time, they use their super long snout to snuffle about in the grass and go and find all of the things they like to eat. So we need to make sure he's got a lovely pointy nose so he can go and find all his food. Okay, so for the next bit, which is his little face, what we want is we actually want a really pale brown, like a beigey colour. And the easiest way to do this is to start with a blob of white. Just a blob of white paint. I've got a little bit left over from the start, but you might need to pop a bit more on your palette, which is fine. So I've got a little bit of white paint. And what I'm going to do is I'm really gradually going to add some of my brown. So that brown we've just been using, I'm just going to add a really little bit into my white until I get like a super pale brown colour. Now mine's a little bit yellowy and I want him to be a little bit more pinky coloured. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the tiniest little dot of red. I don't even know if you can see the dot, it's so tiny. There we go. Tiniest little dot of red. Just to make it a little bit more of a pinky beige colour. But now I need to find a spot where the lights, there we go. There's my beige colour. It'll probably be easier for you guys to see once it's on my canvas. So I will start using it and then you can see it. But we need to add some water. Try not to use up all of your brown because we're going to need a little bit more brown in a minute. But for now, we just need a little bit of this beige colour. There we go, you can kind of see it down here. And for this, you might want to use your small pointy brush. I'm going to carry on with my small angled brush, but you might find it easier with the small pointy one because sometimes you have more control over a smaller brush. But mostly, just make sure you hold your brush really nice and close to your bristles because then you have the most control over them. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to have my long bristles at the top of his head, so up here, and the short bristles facing down. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a bit of a curved line coming out the bottom of his face. And then what I'm going to do is I'm straight away going to curve it back up. It almost looks like a little elephant's trunk, doesn't it? So I curve down from the edge of his spikes and then pretty much straight back up again to create his little nose shape. And then from here, I come down from his nose and into his face. Then what we can do is we can give him a little bit of a chin, and we take this all the way along into his body. So we've come down and then flicked back up again, and then I've curved down from the tip of his nose about halfway into his face, and then we've come down into his body a little bit, like so. And then what we want to do is we actually want to fill all of this in with our beige colour. And the main reason we do this, it's all going to be filled in anyway, but it's really useful to be able to see your shapes once they're filled in. So the best thing to do is fill that whole shape in. Now you might end up overlapping some of your spiky bits, and that's fine. We just want to get all his shapes sorted first. Now I've made him a little bit fat. I've given him a bit of a fat belly by mistake, but that's fine because what we can do, this is why we saved a little bit of our brown, because what we can do is we can add a little bit of brown and just make his spikes a little bit longer. So the belly of our hedgehog, Bruce's little belly, or his quite big belly that I've given him, is the most vulnerable bit of them because all the rest of them is spiky, so it's quite well protected, but their little bellies are not well protected at all. So that's why they roll up in a ball. So they roll up in a little ball to protect their little bellies because they're so sensitive. In case they get attacked, they don't have any way to protect them. So their spikes are really important for protecting those bellies. Now, once you've filled in all of the shape, what we need to do is we need to give him an ear and some legs. They're quite important, the little legs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the legs and then we can do the ear. And the reason I'm doing it that way around is because my spikes are still a little bit wet and the ear goes over the spikes. So don't want to do them I don't want to do his ear too soon. Otherwise, it's just going to go brown. So I'm going to start still with my little beigey colour. And about halfway, so do you remember we came into his face and then we added this curvy bit underneath that I made too big, which is why Bruce looks like he's eaten all the berries. What we want to do, now mine is down in my grass. We definitely want him down in the grass, so that's fine, just maybe not quite as podgy as that. What we want to do, about halfway around this belly area, so about where it starts to come into the grass, about here, but it doesn't need to be exact. What we do is we just make a very curvy little triangle. It doesn't need to be much of a shape. Just a curvy little triangle like so. Now the second leg is bigger because this is his back leg. So what we do is we start a little bit higher. So we come further up towards his nose and then we come down in a bit of a triangle shape again, just a bit of a longer one. And you can curl it out a little bit at the front like a little paw, like so. So they're kind of similar shapes, but one of them goes a lot higher up because his neck's a lot higher up. Like so. Now, hedgehogs do actually have really tiny little feet. They're very cute, really tiny little feet. But hedgehogs, although they're very tiny, although they've got their very tiny little feet, can walk about 2 miles a night just to go find their food. I am way too lazy to walk 2 miles to go and find my food. But hedgehogs will walk that far, which I think is quite amazing for something with such little legs. There we go. So I'm going to give you guys a minute and make sure you've all got that face and you've got that you've got the legs fitted on. And then we're going to add the ear in just a second. So I'm just making sure there's lots of good colour on here. Now you might find that your face area isn't quite a thick enough colour. It might go a little bit see-through. You might still be able to see a bit of blue. Don't worry, because what we can do when we add the ear, we can just go back over it when it's all a little bit drier and just make it all stand out a little bit more. And yeah, it will be a bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mix up some more of my beigey colour because I've kind of run out. So I'm going to take my white again. I actually need a bit more white because I've kind of used it all up and we're going to need a bit more in a minute. So taking my white, because we always start with our lightest colour, then adding a little bit of my brown in again. And then I'm going to add that tiny extra little bit of red. So that is just a little bit of a softer colour again. And what I'm going to do, just going to touch this and see how dry it is. It's a little bit dry, so it should be okay. Just run my finger over it. There we go. Now the ear is literally just a circle. So what I'm going to do, we want his ear sort of halfway around our curve. Again, it doesn't matter exactly, but it's quite nice if it's sort of towards the back of his head. You don't want his ear right on the top. It's not like a dog. You want it kind of towards the back. So about here. And all I do is just curl my brush around. So I've got my long bristles facing up and I'm just twisting my brush in my fingers like so. And then I'm going to take this time as well to just add another little layer of beige. Into all of him. So that he just stands, his whole bit of his little squidgy body is a little bit more obvious. It's a bit of a stronger colour. Now, before we go back to our brown, there's one more little thing we need to do. And that is, we need to add a little bit of shadow onto his back leg to make it look like it's at the back. Otherwise, it would just look like he's got two arms like this. And he doesn't, he's definitely got one at the back. So what we do for this, hold on, I'm just going to add an extra little layer of beige onto this as well, just to make it more solid again. There we go. What we do is we actually take a tiny little bit of our beige, and we only need a really small amount for this, and we just add a little bit of the brown back into it. So it's just a bit of a darker shade of our beige. So I've taken some of my beigey colour, just a little bit, And I've just added a tiny little touch more brown into it. So can you see it's just ever so slightly darker. Mine's actually not that much darker. I'm going to add a little bit more beige into it, or more brown into it. There we go. Now it's a bit darker. And what we do with this is we actually start right where that leg sticks out of his body. So right up here, where it joins his body, I'm just going to add a couple of little brush strokes down his leg with my darker colour. Can you see that? It's just gone a little bit darker, so it just looks like it's behind his body instead of them both being at the front. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know and I will go back over it. More than happy to go back over it. And you can also add a little bit of this darker colour into the little bottom section of his ear. So his ear looks a little bit shadowy as well. And he looks even more cute. He does look very white on the screen, but I promise he is quite beige. He's very beige. Bruce over there is quite pink. He looks a little bit like he might have got sunburn. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our brown. This is what I was talking about before, about needing to have a little bit of our brown left over, because what we want is we want to give him some little bits of spikes that are coming into his body. So I'm going to give you guys a minute, make sure you've all got this done, and then we're going to start using our brown again, just a little bit, to just add a couple more spikes. And I'm going to add a couple more to the bottom of Bruce's body so he looks a little bit less fat. I'm basically putting Bruce on a diet is what I'm going to be doing. No more berries for Bruce. So I'm starting with my small angled brush again, and I've rinsed all my beige off it so it's nice and clean. I'm going to add a little bit more water back into my brown, because while it's been sitting here, while we've been using the beige colour, it will have dried out a little bit and gone a little bit sticky, so you might need to pop a bit more water back in there. And I'm going to start with his belly area. I'll start down at the bottom. And I'm just going to make these spiky bits a bit longer. So his belly doesn't look like it's so sticking out so much. There we go. So hopefully that's blended in his body a little bit more. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to start at the top of his head. Now, if you're using your small angled brush, you're going to want to make sure you've got your long bristles facing down. Because what we're going to do is we're just going to press into the very top of Bruce's head. And you can give him an extra couple of little spikes at the front of his head if you want to. So he looks like he's got a little bit of a Mohican. And then I'm just going to drag some spikes off his face and back into the rest of his body. He doesn't need loads, but we just want a couple of extra little spikes coming into his body so that it looks like his soft face and belly area is attached to the rest of him. Otherwise, he just looks a little bit like his face is stuck on, whereas now it's a little bit better and he looks more like his face and his body are kind of attached. like so. So basically, we're giving him a bit of a snazzy hairdo. Go on one a little bit around his ear. And then you can just add some really little bits along his belly area. Just making all the rest of him join together. So just working into some of that beige colour. To make sure his whole body is all attached. And apart from adding his super cute little face, that is pretty much Bruce. You've pretty much done him. Now we need to give him his cute little butterfly friend. I don't have a friend for the name for the butterfly friend. I need to think of a name for him. And we're going to add the butterfly and the face and the grass. So I'll give you guys a minute, make sure you've all got this sorted. And the next thing we're going to do is going to be the butterfly. Now for this, I'm definitely using my small pointy brush. So if you've been using your small pointy brush all this time, make sure you wash all the brown out of it, because we finished with brown now. And we want whatever colour butterfly you would like. So the instructions work exactly the same. I'll talk you through the shape and then we just fill it in. So if you guys want a pink butterfly or a purple butterfly, green butterfly, brown butterfly, entirely up to you. Honestly, it can be any colour. But as I say, I'm going to make mine a yellowy colour, like the original, yellow with a little bit of orange in. But you guys can make it whatever colour you would like your butterfly to be. You could even do several butterflies. You could have a couple of little ones going up the canvas if you want to. So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do with my small pointy brush, I've just picked up a little bit of water and scraped the excess off, is I'm going to mix together quite a lot of yellow and a little bit of white. Now the reason we're adding the white is because yellow is one of those colours that always goes a little bit see-through. You probably know this if you use colour pencils or felt tips or whatever it is. The yellow one is always a little bit see-through and just a little bit rubbish. So by adding a bit of white to it, it makes our paint almost like chalky, makes it that a little bit thicker and just a bit more of a solid colour, so it should stand out a little bit better when we paint it on over the top of our blue. And then I'm going to add a little bit of water into my yellow, so it's not super, super pale. It's just a little bit more pale. Oh, I'm trying to find a good angle for the light. There we go. It's just a little bit more pale than the original, so that it's just going to stand out a little bit better. I've added a bit of water. And then what I do is I take my pointy brush and I twist it. Again, I need to get out of the light. I twist it through the paint. And what this does is it brings my brush back to a lovely pointy tip so that I've got a little bit more control when shaping my butterfly. So we want to leave a little bit of a gap between the very tip of Bruce's nose and our butterfly. And what we're going to do, so I'm going to start about here. So just a tiny little gap. And then that dot is where my butterfly is going to start. And the butterfly is kind of two triangles where the pointy bits are touching on this dot. So the first one, I'm going to paint up. I'm going to make it a bit curvy, so it curves backwards a little bit, like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a slightly wiggly line coming down and then come back in to join that shape. So it's just basically a big, slightly wiggly yellow triangle, but those corners on his wings, I'm making them curvy rather than too pointy. And then we can add more detail when we put that black around him and really give him some detail. That's when we can sort of make that lovely curved shape, or we can just change up the shape a little bit. And you can, like I said, you can make him however big you'd like, your butterfly. So that's the first wing. And then for the second wing, what I do is I come straight out from that first dot. So I'm coming straight across here. And then again, another curvy triangle. This one's more like a teardrop shape, I think, this bottom one. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a tiny little bit of my yellow that I've just been using, just a little bit. I'm going to pop it to one side and I'm going to add the teeniest, tiniest little dot of red that you've ever seen. Tiniest little dot. To make a sort of reddy orange colour. Now we only need a really teeny tiny bit of this, but we want an orangey red colour. And what I do with this is I start on the very outer edge of his wings, so the wing bits that are furthest away from Bruce, and I just drag in, just add some little orange bits onto those wings. And what this does is it just adds a little extra depth to our butterfly friend here and makes him look a really lovely colour. So just orange that I drag into the yellow. I've definitely added too much orange, so what I'm going to do, rinse my brush off, pick up my yellow again. See, this is the beauty of acrylics, you can just go back over it, and I'm going to add some of that yellow back into where that orange was and just tone it down a little bit. So he goes back to yellow, hopefully. There we go, it's gone a little bit more yellow again. Now, if yours is a little bit see-through, you could always just wait a little bit for it to dry and add another little layer over the top. What you can do is you can pick your canvas up and give it a bit of a waft around to dry it off a little bit more quickly. You could use a hairdryer, or you could just wait a little bit. Go grab yourselves a cup of tea and come back. It's entirely up to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to start adding the black details to the painting. So for this, I carry on with my small pointy brush. And what I'm doing actually while I'm standing here talking to you is I'm actually just twisting my brush back into a small pointy tip, because we want quite a nice small pointy tip for this next bit. So I'm using just black all on its own, but I'm going to add a little bit of water because black especially tends to go the stickiest. So I'm actually just twisting my brush again to bring it back to a pointy tip, but I've added a bit of water into my black to make it nice and smooth and runny again. So it's nice pointy tip. And what we'll do is we'll start with Bruce's nose. So for this, we literally want a round blob right on the tip of his nose, nearly touching the butterfly. So just a round circle right on the tip of his nose. But mine's actually touching the butterfly, that's fine. That kind of touches the butterfly. Sorry to have my back to you. It's very rude of me. I just want to make his, I think the nose is so cute. There we go. His round little nose. And then we also want to use a bit of black to do his little eye. Now, what you could do, if you wanted, is you can actually use the wrong end of your brush for this. So instead of using the brush end, you use the handle end, you pop it straight into your black paint. So it looks like it's got a little hat on. Your brush looks like it's got a little hat on. And you want to come across from the nose into about the middle of Bruce's face. And you can just press your brush, work it around in a bit of a circle for his little eye. So you come kind of across from the nose. I've gone a little bit lower actually, because I'm not very good at imagining lines. And I've just pressed my brush for his dotty little eye. Now, make sure you wipe off the end of your brush so you don't end up getting paint everywhere. And then what we want to do is we just want to use a tiny little bit of paint and just give him a bit of an eyebrow, like so. So just a tiny little black line curving around sort of the top and side of his eye, like so. And then we need to give him his super happy smile. So for his super happy smile, still with our black paint, and I'm still using my small pointy brush. So I'm twisting my brush through my black to bring it back to a pointy tip, like so. And we come down from his nose, about halfway down that nose area. And just give him a curvy, smiley little mouth. Like so. And still, while we've got black, we're going to be using a fair bit of this for all those little detail bits. What we're also going to do is we're going to give him some little claws for his toes so he can do his foraging. So again, still using my small pointy brush, making sure I've got that lovely pointy tip on my brush. You just add little dashed lines at the very edges of his feet. So right at the ends of his feet, I've just done 4 little curved lines. They're really tiny. You just need some little lines to make it look like he's got some little claws. And then we're also going to use a little bit of black to add some extra little bits of his spikes. So what you do, follow the shapes of his spikes and just add a couple of very light little flicky lines with the black. And what this does is it just adds a little bit of depth to him. So they're kind of like shadows in his spikes. And what it does is it makes it look like there's even more of them in there because there's some shadowy bits. So you can add some a little bit higher, not too many up high. I'm not pressing too hard with my brush, so they're quite light. I'm just adding a couple of extra little spikes with my black paint. There we go, just a couple. And then the last thing we need to do with the black paint is we need to add the decorations to our butterfly. So for this, we also want our nice watery black, and we want our brush nice and pointy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with just a little bit of an outline of my butterfly. So with my nice pointy brush. I'm going to start on the top wing, and I'm just going to curve over that top corner and down a little bit. And then I'm going to curve around. And then I'm going to add another little curve in there so that we get that nice sort of frilly edge to the wing. Just some little black curves around the edge. And then one more down here that comes into the middle. There we go, that's the top wing. And then for the bottom wing, what I do is I just do kind of like one line that gradually gets fatter at the back of the wing. There we go. So I'm just neatening my black line up. Like so. And then what we can do is we can add two little antennae. So two tiny little lines that come out the very top of that first dot we added. Two little lines like so. And then what I do is I add my little spots using that same technique of using the wrong end of my brush in my black paint, and you can just add some little spots to decorate your butterfly. And you can add as many or as few dots as you would like. There we go. And then we're going to rinse all that black off our brush, and we're actually going to use a little bit of white. And we're going to use this white kind of in the same way we use the black to just add a little bit of a highlight to some of those quills. So with a bit of white on the brush, you want to add a bit of water into this, and you don't want too much white paint on your brush. So what I do is I just scrape it off on the side of my palette. So there's not too much paint on there, just a little bit. And I've mixed in some water so it's nice and smooth. And what we do is we just add a couple of brush flicks with some white to just add a little bit of highlight towards the top edge of him. Now you can add a couple of these down inside, not too many though. And then we just have a couple sort of towards the outer edge of Bruce. To just give him a little bit of highlight. And then I also use a bit of white on the wrong end of my brush again to just add some little white speckles into my butterfly as well. because it's quite nice to just have a couple of different coloured speckles in there. Like so. And then the very last thing we need to do is we need to add some more grass. So if you don't have any green left, I definitely don't, mine is all dried out. We're going to make some more green colour. So for this, I'm going to go back to using my small angled brush because this is what I really like for doing line work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a blob of yellow. I'm actually going to use up some of that yellow I had for my butterfly. Got some yellow. I'm going to add a little bit of blue, not too much because blue has really strong pigments as well. Little bit of blue, like so. I'm going to add plenty of water because we want this to be really nice and smooth. And we can start to add some slightly flickier brush strokes. So what I mean by that is we want some of those long bits of grass dotted about the place. So we're going to start, if you're using your angled brush, we're going to start with our long bristles at the bottom, down in amongst that grass we made right at the beginning. And what we do, long bristles at the bottom, short bristles at the top, we just start to drag our brush up the canvas. You can overlap Bruce a little bit. You can have some slightly shorter blades of grass in there. You can make them all messy, all be in slightly different directions. And we want some that kind of go behind Bruce. So what you can do is you can have some that sort of start, that look like they're sort of coming from behind him or start up in the air. And this just makes our grass look a little bit more wild and free. So I'm just going to work my way all the way along the picture. We want some bits of grass over here. We want some longer bits at the side here. You can have some bits that start right up in the air, that don't start right down at the bottom. Oh, I accidentally just brushed into my butterfly. Never mind, that's fine. I'll fix that later. My butterfly's got a black line on it now, but that's okay. You can overlap Bruce's little feet slightly. You can overlap his belly a little bit, so that helps to hide his big fat belly that I gave him. And then what you can do as well is you can then add maybe some white or maybe some extra blue or just some slightly different colour to your green so that you have a slightly different shade of green to be working with. So I've added a bit of extra blue, so I'm going to get a slightly darker shade of green now. And you can do the same thing again. You just add a couple of grasses dotted about all the way along that canvas. Oh, so one of the things I didn't tell you about hedgehogs is there are about 15 different species of hedgehog across the whole world. But in England, there is only one type, and that is called the European hedgehog. I know pygmy hedgehogs come from Africa. I can't remember if it's South Africa or other parts of Africa. I can't remember. But yeah, we only have one type of hedgehog that's native. So people who have pets tend to have pygmy hedgehogs. They're not native to this country. They're brought in. But the ones that are native to England, the ones you see when you're out and about, they are European hedgehogs. And sometimes they hibernate. Not all the time, not all of them. Some choose not to, but they're only one of 3 mammals in the whole of the UK that hibernate. So they're quite interesting little creatures. And one thing you do need to know is that they're lactose intolerant. So if you ever get them in your garden, don't leave milk out for them because they're allergic. I think they like cat food though. I I think they like cat food, but they don't like, I think they like milk, but they definitely shouldn't have it because they're allergic to it. So don't leave milk out for hedgehogs. There we are. So I've just done a couple of different coloured grasses to give Bruce a lovely bit of grass to hang out in and maybe find some snacks. And there we are. That is the super, super cute Bruce Quillis. So I really, really hope you guys have enjoyed painting this today. I've loved painting this. We would love it if you would share some photos, especially as you guys are the first ones to do it. So what you can do is you can upload photos onto our social media. So you can upload them onto our Facebook page. And on Facebook, if you just search for Brush Party, then we will show up. So I'm just trying to fix where the grass went through my wet black paint. That's a little bit better. Anyway, yeah, so you can upload them onto Facebook, or you can ask your parents to upload them to Facebook for us. Just search for Brush Party, and then you can create a new post and you can upload them onto there. You can also share them on Instagram, but on Instagram you need to find us. We are at Brush Party UK. So you need to add the little UK at the end, and then you can tag us using the @ symbol. Or you can email us. So if you don't use social media, you can always email us. And the email address is info@brushparty.co.uk. So we would love to see some photos. And if you've got any hedgehog facts to go with your photos, that would be amazing. So then I can learn a little bit more about hedgehogs. But mostly I would just love to see how you've got on. I love seeing your artwork. So please, please do share some pictures. We have got so much more coming up for you guys as well. I think tomorrow we've got the amazing little frog painting. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a little frog on a piece of grass and it's so cute. So lots and lots coming up and available for you guys. Have a look on the website if you want to see what classes are coming up. You just need to go to brushparty.co.uk, and all our contact information is on there as well. So if you have any feedback or reviews you want to leave, you can do that on the website or on our social media pages, and you can contact us on our social media pages as well. You can use all the messenger services on there, and someone will get back to you. So we're always really keen to hear from you guys. We'd love to know how you've got on with Bruce, and I'd love to know if you've given him a different name. Very interested to know what you have called your hedgehogs. So the last thing we need to do before anyone disappears is we need to sign our paintings. Very important to sign your artwork. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bit of a super, oh, I'm really sorry about my dog barking. I'm going to make a bit of a super dark green colour. Sorry about the dog. Super dark green. And I'm just going to pop a little S here at the bottom. And there we have the super, super cute Bruce Quillis. So please do share some photos, and I cannot wait to see how you guys have got on. I hope you guys are all having a really, really lovely week. I don't know whether you're still on Easter holidays or not, but I hope you're having a wonderful time anyway, and hopefully we will see you again really soon. Thank you so much, you guys. It's been lovely hanging out with you this morning.